Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Welcome to Beyond the Back Four, another huge weekend in the Premier League for us to talk about. So, where to begin? Arsenal extended their run with a massive victory in the North London derby. Plenty to talk about, Eberechi Eze in that one. Manchester City slipped up against Newcastle, Liverpool humiliated, and Chelsea winning. We've got Jack, Kieran, and of course Mark Clattenburg to give us all of the insight on the various VAR and refereeing decisions. Let's get started straight away. Jack, tell us please, the North London derby, the winners, the losers. Go.
Well, the big winners were obviously Arsenal, and I think the big winners, along with that, were Arsenal's title aspirations. It does very much feel like we're at a point now where we can almost give it to them in certain respects. It feels a bit like, I would liken it to when Liverpool won the league in 2019. You have these few seasons where it's quite tricky, you come quite close and stuff, but you take learnings from every single year. You start finding where the bottlenecks are, where the problems are, and then you find the solutions for them. And it feels like now Arsenal are at a point where they kind of have a solution and potential solution to kind of any problem they can face. I think we've seen plenty of problems heading into this weekend's game with Gabriel being injured, obviously Victor Gyökeres being injured, Martin Odegaard being injured. You also still have Havertz out and Gabriel Jesus out. And it just felt like none of that mattered. They still had people who could come in, do the same role, play the same role, and make a difference. We've seen that with Eze playing where Odegaard usually plays. Obviously scored a hat-trick, is one arguably his best game of his life on Sunday, in a game where the attention was probably all on him as well because of the transfer news about him potentially signing for Spurs in the summer, opting to sign for Arsenal instead because he's a fan. And then also, really importantly, we've seen it with the replacement of Gabriel in the middle of the defence with Hincapié. Like, that's a sign in there that in the summer probably went over a lot of people's heads. Probably a lot of people weren't really thinking about that signing as being one who could really move the needle for Arsenal. But it just goes back to what I said about trying to find solutions to problems. 2 years ago, William Saliba was injured. That was a problem that they could not find a solution for, and it kind of cost them the title. Last year, they had the Saka injury as well. Couldn't really find a solution to that too. This year, when they miss out on a player like Gabriel, who I think's been their best player this season by quite a considerable distance, they have 3 or 4 options that can slot in alongside Saliba and do that job for him. Hincapié was one option. They could also put Mosquera in there. They could have very easily moved Calafiori or Jurriën Timber into the centre of defence as well. It is just they're at a place now where they have a squad where no matter what happens, essentially, no matter who gets injured, they'll have an option to fill in that need and still be able to play to their top level and still be able to use that tactic that Mikel Arteta loves and that formation that he loves as well.
Mark, I'm going straight to you. You've been on the pitch in the biggest games with the best teams where there's so much on the line. Jack is obviously a journalist. He's just suggested after 12 games, with Arsenal 6 points clear, we give them the title.
Yeah, Sam, we can't always say, like, after 12 games, Arsenal are going to win the title. But what's interesting is it's very similar to last season with Liverpool. I think a lot of the teams are losing around them as well. So there's seem to be this competition that we've seen in, not last season, but the previous seasons where Liverpool and Manchester City were fighting it out. I think Arsenal at the moment, it's theirs to lose. But I think by Christmas, I think we'll have a clearer picture.
Kieran, I've got to ask you, do you agree with that?
I think Mark's made a fair point. But football can change. We've got quite a few fixtures taking place in a relatively concentrated point in time. If Arsenal have extended that lead by the end of December, then they've got to be considered to be very, very hot favourites. I mean, clearly they are hot favourites at present. They've got Chelsea this weekend. What happens if they lose to Chelsea and Manchester City when all of a sudden they get dragged back into it? So we're all experienced enough in football to know that a Christmas and New Year fixture of 3 or 4 games can be transformative at both ends of the table. You only need a couple of bits of luck, a couple of injuries that you weren't expecting, a suspension which you hadn't budgeted for, and everything can change. It's still far too early.
Kim, while I've got you, talk to us about the financials when it comes to Spurs, because would they look at a game like this and think, we need to do more, there's not enough in our squad, we look short of ideas and options and personnel, possibly?
I think there's anybody connected with Spurs will probably have gone home yesterday having had that conclusion. What they then have to ask themselves is do they have the resources to address that? We have the January window not far away. Talks will have already started. As if you talk to any agents, they know which of their clients have already been sounded out for willingness. So as far as Spurs are concerned, they've got to ask themselves two questions. First of all, can we manage to buy players from a PSR perspective? And secondly, do we have the cash to do so? As far as that first question is concerned, Spurs are in a very strong position. Whilst they are making losses, which are quite considerable every year, you're allowed under PSR to ignore your infrastructure costs. Now, Spurs have got infrastructure costs of around about £70 million a year. They've got their academy costs, which are around about another £20 million. So you can look. So people are saying, well, look at the Spurs accounts; they've lost money. You actually, over the 3-year PSR assessment, you can add £300 million back onto that number. So they've got plenty of headroom from a PSR perspective. Then it comes down to the attitude of the owners. Do Spurs have cash? Yes. Do they have debt? Yes. But the loans aren't repayable until 2036, 2037. So a week's a long time in football. 12 years is beyond comprehension. So they certainly have the capacity to spend. And I guess the final question is, do they have the ability to spend that money well? History would say that the jury's out. And this is where I run away as the football finance person to say, well, I don't know what a good footballer is from a bad footballer, because even though I was left back of the year in the 1985 Manchester Accountants League 2, I still think that my ability to spot a good player is somewhat mitigated.
You're far too humble. I can't believe you waited so long to drop that one. Mark, the North London derby, we've seen some controversial decisions over the years, some really exciting red cards from fans' perspectives. How do you feel the man with the whistle got on?
Yeah, it wasn't always difficult for Michael Oliver because prior to the game, there was a lot of media speculation about the appointment. Michael Oliver hadn't refereed Arsenal for 10 months after he sent off incorrectly Lewis Skelly. So it took him a while to go back and referee Arsenal. And it was a bit of a strange appointment, putting him straight in against Tottenham, the arch rivals. So that wasn't a great appointment from PG Wells' point of view, but he is the best referee in the Premier League at the moment. He knows how to control big matches. He does it on a regular basis, and he was a perfect person. He allowed the game to flow. And there was just one key area, Sam, that I want to discuss. It's driving us crazy now on this offside law. We saw Eze's the second goal of Arsenal, Eze's goal, where I know that a lot of clubs now are bringing in set-piece coaches, and they're changing the way the game is being played. And these set-piece coaches are trying to find the smallest detail to make a goal. Simple as. And they're making the referee's life even more complicated because the way the offside law is written, we saw a header by Van Dijk cancelled because Robertson has made a gesture in front of Donnarumma by ducking under the ball. We have a situation where Zubimendi and Trossard are deliberately in the goal area, in line of vision of the goalkeeper. And that week, the second goal of Arsenal was given, where 1 week it's not given, 1 week it is. And what my danger is going forward, and we saw it at Nottingham Forest, Nottingham Forest with Morello's goal, players are deliberately now, as a tactic, are staying inside close to the goalkeeper. And that is then creating a subjective decision in refereeing. 1 week it's given, 1 week it's not. And it's creating frustration among fans, media, everybody in the game. And the only way we're going to sort it out is by either stopping the tactic, by just giving the offside so it doesn't happen and it makes the referee's life easier in the decision-making of offside, or they write it in the law that if it doesn't affect the goalkeeper's ability to save the ball, then the goal should be given. So Van Dijk's football want a goal, but again, I would say Zubimendi and Trossard's situation is more clearer offside because he's in line of the vision of the goalkeeper. So let's get a clearer situation and let's get FIFA and IFAB clearing this offside law, because I'm getting sick 1 week explaining one way, and then the next week we'll have a similar situation and it's incorrectly given. But the set piece coaches are playing a fascinating role because we all know Arsenal have great set piece coaches and they're trying to find every way to get a goal.
I was going to move us on to Chelsea. Thank you, Mark. But in what seems like the most Kieran move ever, he's been quietly putting his hand up because I think he'd like to ask a further question.
Following on what Mark was saying, I was out with a sports lawyer fairly recently, and they said they are now monitoring these decisions because clubs are coming to lawyers and saying, do we have a case for putting in for some compensation about refereeing decisions? And because the rules are now so challenging, I think it puts everybody in a really awkward position. And it would be absolutely awful if a trophy was being won or lost, or relegation was going to be determined by fear of what the lawyers might do subsequent to what happens in a match.
More than fair. Scary futures out there, especially for referees. Right, let's talk about Chelsea. Jack, they've moved up to second. How seriously should we be thinking about this Chelsea team, or do we need a moment to go, yes, but they beat Burnley?
A bit of both, I would say. They're very much clearly, I think, out of any of the teams, they've shown the most propensity to actually challenge Arsenal in some way this season, just because of they have a set starting 11, they have a set formation, they have a set way of playing, and that alone against those clubs like Burnley, and I won't call them smaller clubs, but clubs like Burnley and stuff that come up from the second division, having those things in place and having quality players as well, obviously, makes a huge difference in go and win those games. The next step for Chelsea, obviously, is they go this weekend when they're playing their bigger game against Arsenal. If they go and win that game, then we can have the conversation about whether or not they're really legitimate title contenders. But out of all the chasing pack right now, they're probably the one that you would go, okay, they've kind of shown the most so far. Man City are very, very up and down, very topsy-turvy. And Liverpool, as we'll go on to, are currently quite bad, to be perfectly honest with you. So in terms of that, I would say yes, Chelsea look good. They are impressive. Credit where it's due. But we have to see more before we can get to a point where we're saying, yeah, they can be legitimate title challengers moving forward.
Kim, we've spoken about Chelsea a lot and their specific business model. But for them, Champions League qualification is paramount, isn't it?
It is, and 6 into 4 doesn't go. So as far as their owners, who are, let's face it, Clear Lake Capital private equity, Todd Bowley is a billionaire for a reason in terms of business decision making. The Champions League, especially with the announcement that we've had a few days ago with the switch to Paramount taking over the Champions League broadcasting rights, Champions League qualification is worth £150 million this year if you go ahead and win it, and that's just from TV money. That's excluding gate receipts. Within a couple of years, we could be edging 200 million. So that creates a virtuous circle. That gives you the money, which allows you to go into that transfer market again and to make recruits. Whereas the clubs in the big six which miss out are going to be at a disadvantage. So that is going to be Chelsea's focus. And the noises which are coming from the clubs is all we're interested in is winning the Champions League. So is participating in the Champions League. I think is a legitimate one because it is a business with the football club as a sideline.
Mark, when it comes to Chelsea, I'd like to talk to you about their corner routines. Are you happy with how things were officiated, or do you think we're seeing more long throws, more corners that are with an ambition to score? The tactics have changed. Do you think refereeing is going to change to reflect the tactical change?
It has to, but it's coming more and more. When I was refereeing back in 2016, there was still the tactics, but there was the small details blocking, the small players blocking the big players at set pieces. What you're creating now is because they're trying to find this edge on long throws. We're now seeing a lot more direct balls into the penalty area than before. So when you're refereeing and the game's what we call ticky-tacky, they're passing around the penalty area, it becomes easier to referee because it becomes a one-on-one situation. What you've now got a group of players. And when you've got a group of players, it's trying to penalise the one that stands out because there's a lot of things going on. And what you've also got to penalise is where the ball's going to go. What you don't really want to do is penalise a hold, which has really no material effect because the ball's not going into that area. So referees have got a huge issue dealing with the set plays. But let's get it right. We have technology in place now that if the referee misses it, the VAR, but we all see and we all witness week to week how the mess of the VAR is creating, because 1 week it's given, 1 week it's not. So we're getting no more consistency. But what referees need to do is just have a plan and warn the players even before the throw-in's taken. I'm going to say it, I'm going to penalise it, but be strong and penalise it, because the more you penalise it and the more players get used to it, they'll stop doing it. The tactics in place stop the tactic. If you allow the tactic week in, week out, they'll continuously do it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'm going to move us on to Liverpool because we are slowly running out of time. Jack, you mentioned earlier we're going to get on to Liverpool. This is the moment. Could this be the turning point? Is it possible that Arne Slot loses his job? Is it possible that this slide continues in a way that people didn't think it would? There was moments when they were losing a few games or dropping points and people said, well, it's just a blip. They were getting more points than they should have at the start of the season, and now they're losing some of those points. But this feels like something more significant, doesn't it?
It does. Losing this amount of games in such a longer stretch of period of time is conducive of really genuinely serious problems at the club, as opposed to just like losing 2 games here or there. There's like small things you can change. And I do see some problems with them where it feels like there are some fixes, but the fixes come with other problems. And the main one I was trying to think of was Liverpool were brilliant last season, obviously, but they played a very different way and they played a very different style. And during the summer, Arne Slot basically went out into the transfer market and said, I want players that can make me play more fluid and attacking football. But what that's done is essentially broken the team in a lot of ways and broken the structure defensively of the team. So your first thought would be, okay, well, let's scrap, not think about the summer transfer window, not think about all that money spent. Let's just go back to what made us a good team last year. What made them a really good team last year is they were solid, they were creative in midfield, and they had Salah up front playing arguably the best football of his Liverpool career. Now they don't have those things, so going back to that makes sense. But the issue then is you spent like 500 million on players in the summer. How could you go back to playing that style and forget about these players when you spend 500 million on them? The first thing that's going to come onto people's heads is Florian Wirtz is a flop. Alexander Isak is a flop. This hasn't worked. This is one of the worst transfers, summer signings in history. All that malarkey will come up if they go back to those basics. So they're kind of stuck in a bit of a rock and a hard place in terms of solutions here. Do you wait it out and try to get the best out of Isak and things, or do you push the button on it immediately, reset the last season, and go back to what made you a good side last year? They at least save Arne Slot's job for a few weeks, because there is a lot of talk around Liverpool fandom that he could be the wrong person for the job. We ran a poll on Rising the Cop over the weekend, and 70% of fans actually voted that they wanted him gone already. So there is that sentiment already. There is that thought process already. It's now a case of trying to find the right solution that'll keep his job for a while, and then hopefully integrate the new signings at some point. What I would say on the new signings as well, one of the big fears about those signings is what they essentially did in the summer was sign players without thinking about the players they already had. And the 2 main culprits of that were the signing of Florian Wirtz and the signing of Alexander Isak. 2 fantastic footballers in their own right. But you're signing 2 players to kind of replace what Mohamed Salah's already doing for you in a lot of ways, like providing that creative input and then also providing the goals as well. And that's grand. That's fine if you didn't give Salah the contract and the attack didn't need to be still built around Salah for a few years. But the fact is that he's still there. They give him the new contract, a pretty big one at that. The offense should still be built around Salah, and it's not anymore. And it's hurt Salah, and it's hurt Wirtz, and it's hurt Isak all at the same time. And trying to find a solution to that is going to be certainly tricky. So it is. I'm certainly not paid enough by Liverpool at all to find that solution for them.
Mark, I wonder if you can give us an insight here. Normally, we ask you about the refereeing, but having been on the pitch and seen teams where the manager's on the brink, and in the media we talk about players downing tools and all that kind of stuff, and it's a bit hyperbole. But do you notice trends in clubs where this isn't just, they've just happened to have lost this game? Things are systemically not working. The communication doesn't exist, and the what's the word I'm looking for? The morale is clear. Do you see that in this Liverpool team in ways that you've seen before with other teams?
Some players can down tools, but I don't see that with Liverpool. I know they got beat, and I've been watching the highlights, and Liverpool had some chances early in the match, and if they'd converted one, I think it was at Anderson headed one off the line. If that goes in, it's a different game. I just think sometimes we always see in football, don't we? When the luck's in, your luck's in. When that luck runs out, it seems to run out, and at the moment, it's running out a lot for Liverpool when they just don't seem to be getting that deflected goal. They don't get that little bit of luck. And at the moment, like for example, the Van Dijk header, who knows, 1-1 at the City ground, it could have been a different game. So these small details can go for them. And when it goes for you, it just seems to keep going. It's just at the moment, I believe it's just a bit of luck. But the players are fighting. I watched it at Real Madrid when they played in the Champions League. They were excellent. So they're not a bad team. It's just something's not right. And I don't believe he can keep all of these players happy watching what sees. He doesn't seem to know what his best team is. And then he goes back to his reliable people like Robertson because he doesn't trust Kirkes, for example. He needs to find a stable team that he had the previous season.
Okay, Kieran, the big question. Can Liverpool afford to sack Arne Slot? 70% of the fans want him gone, and that grows and that becomes broader than rousing the cop. Could you see it happening?
They can certainly afford to dismiss him. Yes, it's likely to cost them probably somewhere in the region of 10, 15 million pounds, because not only will he be dismissed, but also all of his entourage would have to go as well. You look at these things from a value perspective. There is now a danger of Liverpool not qualifying for the Champions League, and I think probably at the start of the season you would have said Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester City are 3 certs, and then you could name 4 or 5 clubs who are chasing that final 1 position. Well, that environment no longer applies. With every position as far as the final Premier League table being worth £3.5 million, if Liverpool improve their position by 4 places with a new manager, then that's paid for Arne Slot's dismissal. So it's not going to be a factor in any decisions which are made at Anfield. But I'd also agree with what the other guys have said. Liverpool beat Real Madrid, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and they're the only side to have defeated Arsenal in the Premier League this season. So they can't be that bad. Something's not working. And I think we live in an environment now of simple solutions to complex problems. Sacking the manager is always seen as the easy option, the cheap option and the simple option. It as we've seen at Forest, it didn't work first time round. You could argue at Spurs, it's not necessarily improved things there as well. So be careful what you wish for.
Good drama though, isn't it?
Oh,
good drama for us on the outside. Yeah, sack him, get him gone, bring someone else in, sack them as well. Just a good laugh. They're just caricatures to us. They're not real people. They haven't got families and children in schools. They haven't got to move around. It's all fine. Mark, I want to talk to you specifically about the Newcastle-Manchester City match. Now, I'm sure you enjoyed it, but there were a couple of decisions that benefited Newcastle. And I just wonder how you felt about those. There were people had questions about first the decision not to award a penalty for the foul on, or not foul, I guess, on Phil Foden. Almost one that seemed like it was so late that Foden's had his shot, so maybe it didn't matter. And then about when the lines are drawn and how they met, I think it was Haaland's shirt sleeve. So could you fill us in on those ones and try not to be too magpie heavy?
It was a great game to watch as a Geordie as well. But just quickly, I love, I've always wanted VAR, but what a big frustration again, probably for Manchester City and Guardiola, was how Fabian Schär's challenge is not deemed a foul. If it's not it's a foul, it's inside the penalty area. And the only decision that needs to be checked, was the ball still in play? Because if the ball's still in play, it has to be a penalty kick. If the ball is out of play after the contact by Fabian Schär, then it cannot be a penalty because the ball's not in play. So the only decision that the VAR needs to check is the ball is still in play, and it's irrelevant. I hate when people tell me, well, it doesn't matter because he's already got his shot off. What difference does that make? So I'll pass a ball to a teammate and I pass the ball, okay, and I'm fouled after I passed the ball. Okay, but I passed it, so why should it be deemed a foul? That's a rubbish situation. Fabian Schär took the risk and he came sliding in to try and block the ball because he believed that Phil Foden was going to shoot at goal. That was his only intention. And as he slides in, he clearly catches the foot of Foden. It should have been a penalty kick and a yellow card because it wasn't a goal scoring opportunity because the ball was going away from goal. So it should have been a yellow card. But going to the second situation, we had a very tight offside. Technology decided the offside. The technology's calibrated before the game. It's to the smallest millimetre. Go back 2 seasons ago, that would have probably been given offside because we had a human being making the judgment of where that last point of contact was. Now the technology does it through the sensors in the balls. So that is factual decision. So whatever the technology decided is offside, even by the smallest margin. We can't then turn around and say, well, we're not going to give offside because it's a small margin. So we don't give goals when it's 1 millimetre over the line. We can't have that. So there was a discussion, was Donnarumma fouled before the goal? And that's another argument. Did Harvey Barnes foul Donnarumma? I don't believe he did. He leans into him in a very clever way, which we see week in, week out. Should Donnarumma been stronger? 100%. And if Donnarumma was stronger, then I'm sure they would have cleared the lines, but he allowed Barnes to lean into him. But Donnarumma needs to be more and more, probably getting used to how the Premier League is played, because maybe in Italy, he probably was given as a foul. But in the Premier League, we see this week in, week out, and I wasn't surprised that the foul wasn't given.
Thank you very much. A lot of nodding from Kieran and Mark. They were just this the whole way through. So you've got them on board. Absolutely. That brings us to the end of another episode of Beyond the Back Four. We're back. Yeah, Beyond the Back Four. I don't know why I thought I said that wrong. I did it right. It's a perfectly good job. You've made mistakes at work before. Get over it. It was Beyond the Back Four. That's what I said. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you in a couple of days' time where we're talking about what the Premier League voted for last Friday. Make sure you are subscribed and we'll see you then. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.